welcome to an Irish cottage in the woods. This week, for my growing without a garden, I'm going to be planting peas, runner beans and stubby carrots. Once again, you can see it's all high-tech equipment. We've added the luxury of a teaspoon to our kit, and I'm making some holes in these pots that had salad and coleslaw and soup and so on. I didn't even wash these very well, and you can hear the pop as the holes in it. This one does not want to make a hole. Let's try it the other way up. Oh, there we go, nice big hole now. This is a bit of old drain pipe, an offcut of the drain pipe that I've saved, because I want 6. And I'm putting them into this tub. I made holes around the top for ventilation and in the bottom for drainage. And in the lid, I made some more holes again for ventilation. I don't know how well that shows up, because this is about the 2nd year I've used this. These had fat balls in for the birds, and they make great mini propagators. They don't really increase the warmth that much, but they do keep the mice off my seedlings, because they are a so-and-so for eating things like peas and beans. They do love them. Once they get going, they'll be fine, but for the time being, they need a bit of protection. So I'm going to fill these up with compost. I'm still using the same bag that we were using last time for the potatoes. It's behind me in the wheelbarrow. And in this one, for the peas, I've got old toilet rolls. That's because peas really don't like their roots being disturbed, and they can sulk if you do. So if you start them off in loo rolls, empty loo rolls, nothing special, nothing clever. Once they've got going, you can then pot them on without disturbing the roots, because you can plant the whole toilet roll into your preferred growing pot, and that'll rot away and the roots will run off and they'll be fine. I also bought some beans. These are actually dwarf beans. The others we'll be planting today will be runner beans, and some peas, which as you can see are in little plastic pots. I got these off my local farmers market. Each tray cost me €3, which is really good value, and it'll be interesting to see how well they do when we mess with their roots. So we'll pop those to one side for the moment. Runner beans grow by twining up the supports in their pots, so we will need some sticks in their permanent pots, but for the time being all we're doing in these little things is germinating them. This saves waste. This is cardboard, and again it will just rot away, so I probably won't even bother potting them on from these. I may just knock the bottoms out. This obviously plastic, nasty stuff, but at least it can be reused for a few years before it goes to landfill, and that's a bit better than it just going straight there, which is what would have happened. The boots you can possibly see in the distance. There are a couple of pairs of Wellingtons, one of which I dug up out of the garden here, and a pair of my old riggers, and I've grown things in them for a few years now. They've had holes made in the bottom for drainage, and they'll be filled with the compost to take the beans, because, well, that's all the space bean roots need. If you're feeling posh and you don't want your garden to look like Paddy McGinty's allotment, you can buy posh pots and grow your beans in posh pots. Personally, I'd rather use old boots and save waste. All I've done while you've been away is put compost from the bag, which incidentally was 120 litres, not 150, into the growing starting pots, I suppose you'd call them. I've just shaken it around the loo rolls so it's in between as well as in them. Ooh, that's a bit of grass. And now I'm going to plant the peas. Now where I grew up they used to say you plant 3. 1 to rot and 1 to grow. 1 to thin and 1 for the crow. And I'm thinking, well, the crows can't get in here, and I'm not going to thin, which means pulling out the weediest one which I always think is a bit mean. It's gone to all the bother of germinating and then you pull it out. So I'm popping 2 in each of these loo rolls. I'm just dropping them in on the surface of the compost. And some are rolling to the side, but that doesn't really matter. And I'm not pushing them home until I've made sure I've put 2 in every one. And then that way I don't end up with an empty tube or putting 4 in one of them and wondering why I've got so many plants growing. It's just making it idiot proof basically, because frankly I'm inclined to be an idiot. So I need one more pea out of the packet. Peas, incidentally, look exactly like the ones you get on your plate, just a bit dried up. Because that's all they are. They grow like this in little pods, and you open the pods and you get the peas out. With some varieties you can eat the pods. In other varieties you turn the pods into wine. It's up to you. Personally, I'd rather turn the pods into wine. I shan't waste those because although they were packed, I have to read this with these glasses on, they were packed last year, 2020, but I've got until the end of December 2023 to post them. So if I don't, to plant them even, so if I don't plant them this year up at my main veg plot, well, I can use them for next year. I'll put a paper clip over that and I'll store them somewhere mouse free and in the dark. Now, I don't know how well I can show you this, but sitting on the surface of the compost are 2 little peas in every loo roll, and all I'm going to do is just push them into a dent in the compost in their respective loo roll tubes, just gently. They don't need a lot. There's all sorts of old wives' tales about ways you can keep mice off peas, including apparently soaking them in paraffin. I'm not sure I want to soak anything I'm going to eat in something petrochemically based, frankly. So I just do it the old-fashioned way. I don't let them get near them in the first place, because once they've germinated, usually the mice will leave them alone. If we have a really cold spring, they might still dig down for the pea even after the little plant's germinated, but mostly they'll leave them alone once they've germinated. And I'm just covering these, literally just the depth of the pea again, still trusty plant pot for compost, just covering them. This compost is still quite moist, so I'm not going to bother watering these today because it's quite a damp day here. I will pop the lid on. This will clunk. Notice my high-tech potting bench made of an old shower tray, and that will keep the humidity in. If we get some very hot sunny days, or if we get some very dry days with the wind blowing through, I will come and water them, but otherwise they'll be fine for a few days now. Now I'm moving on to the beans. Now, runner beans are quite chunky things. When you open the packet, they're straight away in the packet. They're not in an inner packet, so do be careful you don't throw them all over the floor, as I did the first time I opened a packet of beans. And there is a right and a wrong way with a bean, but if you're not sure, lie it on its back. And again, I'm just covering them to their own depth in compost, literally just so I can't see them. And I'm only putting 1 each in these pots because runner beans are pretty good at growing. I have to say I'm slightly surprised that these are so white, because often they're quite grey or pinky coloured, but different varieties come in different colours. And again, I'm not sowing them all, I'm only sowing, I think there's 6 there, yeah, 6 for the pairs of boots. And I've got until 2022 to plant those, so again they'll go away somewhere mouse proof. And again, I'll pop the lid on these mini propagators. The lid for that one's on the floor, I'll pick it up in a minute. Right, I'm going to have to stop for a second because I need to pick something up and my mic won't reach that far. While you were away, as they say in all the best videos, I picked up my lid and I picked up this little trough. I've had this a few years now. It came with holes already in it, and I've got this for these peas that I bought from my local farmer's market, ready started. I start them in loo roll tubes because they don't like their roots messed about with. These are in these little units, so it'd be interesting to see how well they do. If I put compost straight into that, to go straight through these holes, so again, another high-tech solution. These are the cardboard separators from the tins of dog food. I've no idea why they've got a little hole in them. I'm sure there's some very good reason for it. All I'm doing is popping that. Oh, you can't stay. I just spotted Mr. Slug. Don't want you eating me beans. Go on, quick to the woods. Find something there. Right, as I was saying, just cut it in half, or ripped it in half in fact, and I'm just popping that down. Just enough to stop the compost dropping straight through. In time it'll rot away, but in time the compost will have consolidated and be much less likely to drop away through the holes. You can be really picky and put drainage stones and all sorts, but personally I find a bit of cardboard at the bottom. But be careful, always use cardboard that's plain brown. Don't use the sort of cardboard that's got a lot of printing and stuff on it, because the various inks could very well be toxic. I don't know that they do you too much harm, but it's just not worth it in my opinion. There's plenty of plain brown cardboard out there. And it doesn't do any harm to be better safe than sorry. Now again, I'm fluffing up the compost with my trusty trowel by simply scraping at it with a couple of trowel. You can probably hear the bag. I can't angle the camera to show you at the moment, but I'm scraping it loose where it's compacted in the bag. It's 120 litres in that bag, by the way, not 150 I think I claimed it was. There we go, that'll do. Give it a bit of jiggle just to settle the compost out. Now there are 6 little potlets, I suppose, I don't know, what do you call them? And at this point I'm going to put my gloves on because my hands get a bit sore with wet compost and it just keeps the worst of it off my hands. Bought these on the local farmer's market, £3 for this little pot. I'll come back to those in a minute. They're other beans, they're French beans. Now, when you're tipping these out, you really don't want to be squashing the stems, and ideally you'd pick them out by the seed leaves, but I'm not sure I can get hold of the seed leaves enough now. So I'm going to basically be a little bit rough with them the other way. I'm going to squish them out. I think these are probably going to crackle horribly in the process, but we'll give it a go. 1, 2, 3. Right, sit down on it. Right, you see, the roots are already right at the bottom. I'm just making a little dent, just big enough for the lump of compost. And I'm trying desperately not to mess with their roots, because peas can sulk like fury if you mess with their roots. So I'm just trying, and I'm popping them in lengthways so that I can get them all into this little trough. Now peas don't twine. Peas send out little, I don't know what you call them, little spiral tendrily things, and those grab hold of their supports, and they don't grow from one single stem either like a runner bean. They'll send out lots of stems, especially if you start with several in a pot like we seem to have done here. But anyway, we'll see how we get on. Come on, out you come. Don't be shy. Out you come. See yourself. There we go. I want that one, because with that one you can clearly see the actual pea that germinated. So there we go, let's get you in. Over there. These last 2 in. Come on, out you come. Now, I'm not fussy what flavour, pick what variety of peas these are, not what flavour, what variety of peas these are. I just picked them up off my local market because they will give me peas that I can eat and pods that I can make into wine. And however, they usually tell you the variety somewhere on the label. And this one isn't going to, it just says peas. That's helpful of it, isn't it? The packet probably told me, I don't know, let's see. I'm sticking that in there, I know full well they're peas. Yeah, the packet did, the packet said they were Clevedon Wonder. That's the variety of pea. If you're that bothered, keep a note, because in future years you can go, oh, I tried that variety, it didn't do so well in my area, or it didn't like the compost or whatever. Personally, if it just says peas, I'm not sure that's worth keeping. But anyway, I'll pop that there. And I shall pass that little multi-tray thing on to a friend of mine who uses those sorts of things quite a lot. Pop them up there. Just going to take the mic off for a second because the next thing I'm going to do is fill a bucket. Yes, really. More cardboard in the bottom because this is actually a metal bucket. So we drilled holes in the bottom, they can be seen for drainage. I'm trying to avoid any plastic I possibly can. So for me, it has to be a metal bucket or a nice terracotta pot, which is what I've got down there. So I'm now going to fill this with compost, which again is going to be a bit boring. So I'm sure DD2 can at this point do something clever with the fast forward. And why didn't I actually stop the video? Well, because I wanted you to see that gardening sometimes can be a bit boring. And I don't want you going away with the impression it's all fun, fun, fun. Which an awful lot of things do. I'm trying to assume you've never gardened in your life before. I don't cook. And there's a standing joke in our family that you get cookery books that say things like, make a basic bechamel sauce. I haven't got a clue what a bechamel sauce is or how to go about making one. And I found that kind of thing annoying. So I try, wherever I can, to assume you know absolutely nothing but you're highly intelligent. Because I figure that's probably about it. So all I've done here is filled this bucket with compost to about that far off the top. And I've just made a groove with my fingers, about 1 centimetre deep, or 3 grooves actually, 3 lines. I don't know if that'll show up on camera. And what I'm going to do now, so I have to take my gloves off for this bit. I've got these little carrots. These are what I grew in London on my balcony. And they say on them, ideal for kids. Well, I'm a big kid. And the reason they're ideal for kids is that they grow really quickly and they grow really well. And I'm shaking this down because I'm feeling here, and I can feel the seeds up here. So I don't think these are in an inner packet, and I don't want to waste any seeds because, again, I've got until the end of 2023 with these, so I don't want to waste any seeds. But carrot seeds, unlike peas and beans, are tiny. And a lot of places will tell you to thin them after they've sprouted. Which basically means go along and pull out a whole load. No, they've gone to the bother of growing. I'm not doing that. So I'm just going to sprinkle these in little tiny amounts. There's a bit of a clump there, but we'll have to see if we can't thin a few of those out before they've even sprouted. Because carrot seeds are tiny. You can do them individually, but you need the patience of a saint. I just want a couple more for that corner. There we go. And the rest of them are going back in the packet because I have got another pot And you will see there is another pot. I've got rather a nice terracotta pot that I treated myself to with some of the money from my lovely Patreons. Because I'm trying very, very hard not to buy any more plastic, but I do need plant pots, and the local shops do sell these nice terracotta ones, but they're not cheap. Now I'm just patting this gently, just to firm it off a little bit, so that if we get a bit of a wind or a breeze, it won't all blow away. And that is how you grow carrots in a bucket. This could just as easily be an old mop bucket that sprung a leak. It doesn't have to be a posh tin one. These were bought to go in my herb garden a few years ago, and they did have a few herbs in, but some of the herbs are annuals, and this one was knocking around, so I thought I'd use it in the gardening without a garden because it's got a handle. And with a handle, it means if you're in a rented house and your landlord's not happy about you digging up the lawn, but you've got a bit of pathway you can turn into a garden for a month or two, and then you have to move, you can take your bucket of carrots with you. So I'm going to move this out of the way, because the next thing I'm going to do is deal with those French beans. And they too are going in one of these lovely terracotta pots. Now these things have a single hole in the bottom for drainage. So a little bit of cardboard over the hole, jobs are good. And I'm going to fill these to about that depth with compost, because the little beans are already in, again, these little modules. So I shall do that. Cue fast forward. I give the pot a little bit of a jiggle, just to settle the compost in a bit, because even though I've scraped and scrawked it, it's still a little bit fluffy. And I notice there are one or two quite lumpy bits. I don't know what that is, but it's quite solid, as you can hear. Now these are dried out a little bit, so I did stand them in a dish of water. I'm hoping that's done enough. And again, are they going to tell me anything more than that they're French beans? No, so we don't need that. French beans, unlike runner beans, grow as a little bush. They don't twine. And again, I'm going to be very careful, because these should have been pricked out a few weeks ago, really. But I only bought them this week, so that's what we left with. We are where we are. Let's teasing them out. Right, let's have a look. There are 4 little beans, and look, the roots are desperate to be getting further into the soil. Oops. So we'll pop them in. I'm just setting them on my compost, up against each other. I don't know whether any of these are going to show me the beans. There you go. There's one of the beans that they grew from. Probably look very similar to the runner beans, actually. But French beans grow in little clumps, and they're slightly sweeter than runner beans. And our family get through a heck of a lot of them. And they're great for kids to grow. If you're trying to get your kids into growing, French beans, in my opinion, are better than runner beans, because they grow in these little bushy clumps. And I've just noticed that one hasn't quite germinated. And I don't know if you can see, you probably can't, but there's quite a gap in the middle there. I'm going to take a bit of compost, and that's where that one can go, in the hopes that it catches up with its brothers and sisters. But yeah, French beans are more interesting for kids, because they grow in these clumpy little bushes that they can see, not ruddy great things that disappear off way over their heads. And French beans, you can eat like runner beans, you can eat the whole pod. I mean, that's a bit lumpy. And kids love stuff that they can just take off the plant and eat. As long as you've kept it from where Fido or Felix can do their stuff, then they can do just that. My kids were notorious for eating things straight out of the garden, and one of them turns mid-30s tomorrow, so I don't think it did them any harm. And you've also got the fact that they're full of vitamins and minerals. Although DD2 will tell you, when we lived at our last house, Rainbow Cottage, I used to grow peas in the garden, and we had a lot of pigeons in that area because it was in the city centre, or in the suburbs of a city, and I actually thought that my peas weren't doing very well and that the pigeons were getting them, and I was getting really cross and giving out about these pigeons. And it was for years and years later that she admitted she'd actually eaten all the peas off the pea plant, which wouldn't have worried me at all. But she thought if I was that cross with a pigeon, how more cross was I going to be with her, and didn't dare own up. So she was well into her 20s before she told me what had happened to all those peas, which was a bit annoying for both of us really, because it meant I just gave up growing peas. So we're back growing peas, and hopefully DD2 won't eat them all this time. So these were little French beans, £3 for that lot. And these were little peas, £3 for that lot. And the beans and peas in there, I think these packets are a couple of quid each. And there's plenty for next year. And at my feet is a bucket of carrots. And again, I've used perhaps a quarter of the packet. And I'm now going to stop the video and carry these over to the growing space by the side of the cottage. And once the runner beans have got to about a little bit shorter than these actually, when they're just showing seed leaves, I'll transplant them into these old boots, because there's enough depth in those for a runner bean. And I'll stick a bamboo cane in the back for them to twine their way up. These won't need any more support than they've got. The peas they always say twiggy pea sticks, just don't use willow. Otherwise what you'll have is a willow plantation with peas added. Similarly with buddleia. One of the prettiest allotments I ever saw was when a guy had used buddleia trimmings for his peas. It looked fantastic. He got a really good crop of peas that year because it attracted every bee in the area. Bees love buddleia. And I always thought if I had a big enough space I might just try doing that. But I don't think this little garden's the place for it, so I'll try and find something more twiggy. But you could always use a bit of chicken wire on a frame or something clever like that. I tried that last year, mine fell over. I'm sure you'd be more clever than that. But they do need some support because already there are little tiny tendrils coming. So I will have to go and find something. But that is now going over to the gardening space. My high-tech potting bench, by the way, is the old shower tray out the cottage on a stack of compost bags, and that's my studio this week. That's ready for me to plant a few more peas in, and over here is our little garden for growing without a garden. And I'll show you a few little things. First of all, the potatoes, which I was hoping by now to show you little sprouts. There is a little tiny sprout in this one, just there. But we've had some really cold weather, so they've just sulked. And I've popped a grill over the carrot bucket. It's a bit of an old, I don't know, oven I think, out one of the mobiles. Just to stop local feral cats using it as a litter tray. There you go, you see already. We've got peas, we've got French beans, we've got a few salad potatoes, we've got a few carrots, we've got runner beans, we've got more peas, because I like peas, and we've still got all this space yet. And I have plans for that.